Have you ever wanted to manually focus when in autofocus mode? You know, let the camera do all the heavy lifting, then grab and control when you need to perform those minor adjustments or to lock things in. Well, in Canon patent filing JP 2024-042239, filed on September the 15th, 2022, and published March the 28th, 2024, Canon claims to solve the problem of providing a lens device advantageous in operability of setting change of an operation mode. I know what you're thinking. This patent filing claim sounds like utter nonsense, like it was written by an early version of ChatGPT that didn't understand the first thing about cameras, lenses, or how they work together. In fact, I thought it was utter nonsense that I bypassed this patent filing twice. In fact, it wasn't until I saw the patent published on the new camera by Vishishta that I was able to go back and take a much closer look at the patent filing application, the diagrams and blueprints. And what I discovered is that Canon has come up with a few new switches and controls and menu settings that help improve the user experience when it comes to focusing on your subjects and objects. Because at the end of the day, getting shots like these, it matters more than pixels. It matters more than the weight of the camera. It matters far more than all the video refresh rates and resolutions. Pulling and maintaining focus, locking onto the eye of the subject from a distance, is no easy task. The first thing that I want to do is address the probability of what's covered in this patent will come to pass in cameras such as the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, the Canon EOS R1, and all future refreshes to other Canon cameras, mirrorless cameras, APS-C cameras, and full-frame cameras. This switch should look familiar. It's the traditional switch found on most Canon lenses, both EF and RF alike, allowing us to switch from manual focus to autofocus. But when Canon released the R7, it came with the manual focus switch on the front of the camera. The R10, announced at the same time, gets the very same switch. And this is proof of what I've been saying all along, and others like Rock Politics have also been saying, that just because a patent application was published a couple of days ago, it doesn't mean that Canon hasn't been working on it for the past couple of years, back to the date of when they filed the patent. And of course, to actually file a patent, you have to do a whole bunch of work prior to that to be able to, well, deliver your research results, to review it with the legal team and your engineers to put out a patent filed application. And it also means that the likelihood of seeing this type of advancement, that what we're going to cover off in just a short moment, we will likely see these enhancements in the Canon EOS R5 Mark II and the Canon EOS R1. So besides switches, what else? What other goodies are found in this patent application? I want to focus your attention to Figure 4 of JP 2024-042239. It's broken into three parts: Figure 4A, Figure 4B, and Figure 4C. You're not going to find this switch on the Canon RF 50mm f1.2, or the more recent 100mm f2.8, or even the most recent Canon RF 100 to 500mm. But you will find it on the recently announced Canon RF 200 to 800mm. I know what you're thinking. Why am I so focused on manual and autofocus switches? Whether it's on the front of the camera like the R7 and the R10, or if it's on the lens for Canon's full-frame mirrorless cameras, such as the R5 and the R3. Well, once again, I'm trying to drive home that point, a very important point, that just because a patent application was recently published, it doesn't mean to say that we can't find these capabilities in just recently announced cameras, lenses, or accessories. And it certainly doesn't mean to preclude that we won't see it in the Canon EOS R5 Mark II and the Canon EOS R1. So now let's get to the crescendo. What I found most exciting about this patent application is buried in Figure 4. Let's do an English translation so it makes a bit more sense. The default option is what we have today. Manual focus isn't operable when the camera's in autofocus. You either have manual focus or you have autofocus. But the second option allows us to manually control the focus while we're still in autofocus mode. And this is huge. When I'm focusing something, an object or a subject that isn't moving, and let's go ahead and pick on the moon, this guy right here, even though the Earth is moving at a rapid rate of around 1,000 or 1,600 kilometers an hour, the perceptions of movement are rather slow from our frame of reference. To nail focus when shooting at 800 millimeters or 1600 millimeters, I put the lens in autofocus mode. I let it focus on the moon, then I immediately switch to manual focus, locking it in and performing manual adjustments myself. But by switching from autofocus to manual focus, not only does it take extra time, but that pressure on the lens often moves the subject out of frame, which is rather annoying and it gets a bit fiddly. Allowing me to have the camera in autofocus mode and then to interject with manual focus to perform those minute adjustments, that's a really big deal. And if you're shooting birds, slow-moving birds that is, because some of them, you know the ones I'm talking about, they're there for a second and then they're gone. I mean, sparrows are a perfect example of that. But other birds such as turtle doves or blue jays, cardinals, well, once they're in their spot, they're kind of like, I'm the king of the hill here. I'm going to enjoy this nice meal. I'm going to sit on a branch. And this is where having autofocus to go right in and grab it, then switch over to manual focus without actually having to touch anything other than the focus ring, I think it's a big deal. But the third option is manual focus after autofocus. This means that we're granted manual focus only after our camera has performed the function successfully. This means that we're granted manual focus abilities over the lens only once the camera has successfully, based on its own criteria, locked focus onto the subject. Again, the big benefit is manual intervention. So all we have to worry about is the minute adjustments to the focus, allowing us to get the results we need quicker with less effort. No Canon cameras currently have the option to break out of autofocus mode without using that switch. There's no manual intervention in autofocus mode. This is something that I expect to see in the upcoming Canon EOS R5 Mark II or the Canon EOS R1, and to follow in other Canon cameras as they are refreshed. But as always, the devil's in the details. Now, if we ignore the default option, which is option A, and look at options B and C, what we're getting is the ability to stay in autofocus mode, but when we need to, well, take back control. The only question I wonder is okay, let's assume an example here. Let's imagine that moon again. I love showing the moon, but let's not do some B-roll here because I think it's very important to communicate what I'm trying to accomplish here. So it's a really cold night. It's minus 20, minus 15. There's a wind, and my fingers, for every moment it's out there on the camera and on the lens, it's just freezing them. So I leave it in autofocus mode, but I select the option of where when I grab the focus, I can perform minute adjustments. So I let the camera automatically focus on the moon, and once it gets focus, I then use the focus ring to manually adjust so I can get those craters rock sharp, and it makes a huge difference. The autofocus itself just doesn't pick out that level of detail. Now the only question I wonder is, okay, once I've maintained that manual control, does the camera stay in manual control mode only until I tell it otherwise? Or does it go back to full-on autofocus mode after a certain amount of time, a time interval? And that's the one thing I'm not sure about. So once again, the devil's always in the details, and we just don't have those details here. Autofocus is one of the most important capabilities that we find in our cameras. People who own Sony and Canon cameras are always raving about their autofocus capabilities, or the lack thereof. For example, having bird eye detection is one of the most important characteristics of any modern camera that's allowed me to get shots like this, and to do so from kilometers away at 800 millimeters using bird eye autofocus. It's absolutely impressive. These capabilities just go back 20 years or even 10 or 15 years, and to be able to nail focus like this on a bird from a distance or any subject based on the eye, the pupil itself, has proven to be very, very difficult. You would be out there for an entire day just trying to get one shot and trying to get it close enough. And you'd play around with the aperture, trying to pick an aperture where, you know, most of the bird's head would be within focus. But as you move further out in the distance, there are certain challenges there. You start to pick up atmospheric turbulence. You start to lose sharpness. And that becomes a bit of an issue. When I shot this bird, unfortunately, it was about 1 kilometer or 2 away, and the sharpness isn't too bad. But ideally, I would like to capture this bird at around 600 to 700 millimeters, being no more than 50 feet away. That would give me a much better, much clearer image. What do you think? What do you think about this patent application? JP 2024-04-2239, is that it? No, it's 2239. when I first saw this, I was completely dumbfounded. I didn't even understand what it meant, and I completely bypassed it because on a daily basis, there's anywhere from like 18 to 45 patent applications new from Canon. And I always zoom in on that problem statement first, because if it's vague and if it's just doesn't seem to have any substance to it, I figured, okay, well, this is the most important problem they're trying to solve, and it's ambiguous at best. I close it off and go on to the next one. And what this has shown me is that, unfortunately, I'm probably bypassing some rather interesting patents. And thank you to the new camera, I was able to see this just earlier this morning. I was looking at it and I thought, wow, this one has a lot of potential. This is about new menu settings in the camera to control existing functionality. It's not about adding new functionality to the camera itself in terms of drive motors and what it's able to do. It's allowing us more minute control over those operations. And that, to me, I think is a really big deal. And that's what I'm excited to see in the Canon EOS R5 Mark II and the Canon EOS R1. And there's no reason why this shouldn't percolate down to all other Canon cameras as they're refreshed. The R6 Mark III, the R8 Mark I, the R50 successor, but don't expect it in the R100. I know, I keep picking on that camera for good reason. Basically, it's the Canon EOS R50 Mark II with a few features taken away and a slightly higher price. Yay! Don't we love it when that happens? I don't know, you won't find anybody that reviews the R100 and says, hey, it's a great camera. I mean, fair enough, there is a viewpoint, whereas if you're a Costco, you can get this camera in your store, sell it really, really cheap, and then people can get it and hate Canon. So again, from the user experience point of view, I don't understand the R100. If you're interested in the R100, just get the M50 Mark II. It's cheaper, and because they're killing off the EF-M mount, you'll be able to get a whole bunch of lenses for cheap, and you'll still be able to get service and support for many, many years to come. If you're interested in this patent application, you find this information, well, interesting, then go ahead and subscribe and choose all notifications if you want to be kept up to date. I've got about 3 more patent applications already shot, edited, and uploaded that'll be coming out over the next couple of days. I find this stuff truly interesting, and I've got it down to a point where I actually have a pretty good understanding of what's being said in these patents, and enough that in this video, I really didn't get into a lot of the details quoting the patent application itself. I think in this case, it was the figures, the blueprints, the images, the artifacts that really told the story. And I love those ones because to me, in what I do, which is enterprise architecture, that's my day job. A picture is definitely worth 1,000 words. We focus on images because regardless of your level of experience, from where the pyramid's very thin at the top of the organization, this what we call the executive officer level, all the way down the pyramid where we get into more detail, more depth, or more breadth, images work on everybody. And that's why, again, I like to give you that mental image of a picture, because when you always hear in your place of work people talking about requirements or a vision statement or objectives and goals or specifications, and they're synonymous. They're the exact same thing, because if you're the CEO of a company, well, he's focused on the vision, the strategic plan, the goals and the objectives. And then at the project manager level, we're focused on more the requirements. And then, of course, the coders, the developers, they're focused on the specifications. But they are all requirements. Vision is the requirement of what we must do as our entire organization to get to a certain point in the future. The requirements and specifications are what the program manager must communicate to the developers to ensure that the solution is built properly so it's strategically aligned. Back to that vision. All right, enough enterprise architecture. I'm sure you want to get back to the rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in purchasing any of the camera gear talked about in this video, the RF 100 to 500 millimeter is still $300 off. And you know what? If you've been thinking about getting this lens and you're not sure, buy it. It's an incredible lens. I was out shooting with the 200 to 800 today because I need to understand how well that lens works. So sadly, I left this one behind, but I mean, it's so lightweight, it's so compact. The sharpness is really good, all that stuff, but the stabilization of this lens is second to none. I can't believe a lens with this focal ratio range can produce such incredible stabilization. I mean, just look at this shot here. I'm on the water in a boat and I'm shooting video handheld. Now with IBIS and with the shutter rate set, you can easily take photos, no problems. But video, where I'm shooting 30 frames per second, if things are bouncing around, you're gonna notice that. And I can tell you when I was shooting on the boat here, I wasn't shooting at 100 millimeters, I was most likely shooting between 200 to 400 most of the time. The stabilization of this lens is absolutely incredible, and at $300 off, I highly recommend it. I don't think you're going to be disappointed, even if you only use it half the year. It's a terrific lens. So if you're interested in purchasing these using my affiliate links down below to Adorama, B&H, and Amazon.com, these guys right here, I do feel the need to be transparent. I do get anywhere from 2 to 12% back. And what that allows me to do, and a big thanks to everybody that has used my affiliate links in the past, it allows me to grow this channel far beyond its normal reach for around 51,000 subscribers, because I'm able to purchase lenses like the 100 to 500 and tell you what it's like to live with day in and day out instead of just having it for 3 or 4 days. And the same for the 200 to 800 millimeter, which is why I can do a video on this patent application talking about the autofocus system and speaking from experiences with super telephoto lenses. But that's it for now. Have yourself a great weekend. Happy Easter. It's Easter Sunday, I believe today. What day is this? Yeah, I think this is Sunday when I'm publishing this video. I'm recording it on Saturday, so yes, it's going out Sunday. So happy Easter Sunday. I know some people celebrate on Saturday and Friday. And then, of course, Monday, we're back to work. But I've already got videos scheduled for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So what's coming out Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday? Well, go ahead and subscribe and choose all notifications. But if you don't, I know how YouTube works now. It doesn't matter. You watch one of my videos, and then all they're going to do for the next couple of weeks is recommend every single video I've ever put out. I know it's one of the frustrating things about YouTube because, you know, I'll click on, there'll be one of these things, I'll be like, click on it, and it's about the US election. And then all of a sudden, for the next couple of weeks, it's everything about the US election, from MSNBC, from Fox, from everybody. And it's just annoying. I wish we could go back to the old ways of subscribing, and if we didn't do that, then it would pull a couple of videos from our channels and things that are very similar to that. I just find now that it just wants to, it's like we want to binge watch everything. Do you find the same thing? Anyhow, thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a great Easter, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers.